In the late 1800s, an expedition set out from a remote harbor in northern Europe. It was meant to be a routine journey into the frozen interior, charting unknown land and waterways. The party was small, disciplined, and carefully equipped. Weeks later, every trace of them had vanished. The final decades of the 19th century were an age of measured ambition across northern Europe. Scientific societies gathered in quiet lecture halls. Maps were unfolded. Names of distant valleys, lakes, and coastlines were discussed with calm certainty. Yet much of the land to the far north remained largely unvisited by outsiders. The frost-bitten plains, dense forests, and barren ridges formed a wilderness where travel was slow and survival was never assured. It was here that the idea of a modest expedition first took shape. The goal was not glory. It was documentation. The party intended to follow older trade paths and rivers, collecting geographic notes and natural samples. The members were carefully chosen. They included a surveyor, a physician, a naturalist, and several experienced guides accustomed to harsh terrain. Their leader was a quiet man with a reputation for patience and order. The expedition was deliberately small. Small meant efficient. Small meant controlled risk. Supplies were prepared with equal care. Canvas tents, wax-sealed crates, thick wool garments, tools for measuring distance and elevation, journals bound in leather. The tone was scientific rather than adventurous. This was not a legendary voyage into myth, but a calculated step into little-seen country. Letters were written to families. These letters were steady and factual. There was no hint of fear. Departure came on a cold morning when the harbor was still. The men posed briefly for a photograph beside their equipment. There was nothing dramatic about the scene. No flags. No declarations. Only a small group of disciplined travelers beginning their assigned work. Local residents watched them leave without ceremony. It was understood that the expedition would return before the following winter. The first dispatches arrived as expected. Notes on weather. Descriptions of terrain. Small details about game, vegetation, and the reliability of old paths. The writing remained calm, structured, and precise. The expedition traveled slowly northward, always recording, always measuring. There was never any sign that disaster was near. If there were doubts, they stayed within the privacy of conversation, never written down. Then, without warning, all communication stopped. Weeks passed. Then months. The season turned colder. Concern grew, but it developed quietly, without panic. Rescue attempts were discussed, postponed, discussed again. Snow closed the mountain passes. Rivers froze. The land became silent and inaccessible. Families waited. Officials prepared statements but said little. There was hope, but it was restrained, formal, and uncertain. By the time spring returned, the expedition had ceased to exist in any verifiable way. When the snow retreated from the northern ground, the first search parties departed. They followed the same planned route, carrying copies of the original maps and journals. The expectation was simple: they would discover a damaged camp, an overturned sled, or some other clear sign of misfortune. Instead, they found empty ground. The early stages of the expedition's path were still visible. Tracks marked where men and equipment had once passed. Tree branches had been cut cleanly. Stones had been arranged near temporary fires. Everything suggested careful order. But further on, the signs began to fade. Footprints thinned. Paths dissolved into untouched earth. It was as if the land itself had erased what had happened. Search teams questioned isolated settlements. The answers were always the same. Travelers had been seen. Calm. Organized. Unhurried. There had been no sign of illness. No disputes. No unusual weather. Then nothing. The guides examined the terrain with increasing concern. They looked for clues that only they could read. Broken moss. Disturbed roots. Shallow depressions in the soil. Yet the land told no story. The silence became oppressive. Progress slowed, not from exhaustion, but from uncertainty. The searchers no longer knew where to look, or even what they hoped to find. At one point, a set of faint tracks appeared near a riverbank. They were studied for hours. Measurements were taken. Comparisons made. In the end, even these marks dissolved into speculation. The river flowed on without comment. The forest remained still. Reports sent back to the coast became shorter. Less confident. Words like possible and unconfirmed began to appear. Officials refused to draw conclusions. Families waited in dignified quiet. There were no public accusations. No dramatic claims. Only waiting. Eventually, the search widened. Valleys. Caves. High ridges where the wind stripped the ground bare. Camps were set up. Fires burned through slow nights. The men spoke in low voices. Some began to believe that the expedition had turned back along an unrecorded route. Others suspected that an accident had occurred in some hidden ravine, sealing everything beyond discovery. But there were no bodies. No tents. No broken tools. No clothing. No journals. No scattered belongings. No trace. When the final search party returned to the harbor at the end of the season, they carried nothing but lists of locations checked and found empty. There were no conclusions. Only absence. The official records described the event as unresolved. And gradually, everyday life resumed. Years passed, and the missing expedition became an unfinished sentence in regional memory. New maps were printed. New journeys were planned. Yet the unanswered questions remained like shadows across the north. From time to time, renewed efforts were made to locate the vanished group. Each new attempt ended in the same quiet confusion. One summer, a team uncovered a small metal instrument buried near a lake. It resembled the surveying equipment used by the lost expedition. Hope rose briefly. The object was examined, polished, photographed. But no clear link could be established. It might have belonged to traders. Or hunters. Or another party entirely. The discovery faded into uncertainty. Another year, a faded scrap of cloth was found wedged between stones in a remote gorge. Again, it seemed promising. Again, nothing was proven. The cloth could not speak. It offered no final message. The absence began to feel deliberate, though no one could explain how. An expedition of trained men, carefully supplied, had moved into the northern interior and simply ceased to leave marks upon the world. Their footprints had been erased. Their camps dismantled by wind and time. Even the animals seemed to have scattered anything left behind. Family records preserved precise details of names, faces, and handwriting. But these private documents only deepened the mystery. The men in the photographs looked ordinary. Their expressions were steady. There was no sign that history would seal them inside a story with no ending. In academic circles, measured debates took place. Some proposed that the group had traveled farther than expected and perished at the edge of the mapped world. Others argued that they might have been absorbed into isolated communities, leaving behind the identities they once held. A few believed the truth lay beneath ice or deep water, where no searcher could reach. Yet no theory could overcome the fact that nothing definite had ever been found. No bones. No journals. No equipment. Not even a single clearly identified campsite from the final stage of the journey. The record was a column of blank lines. This was the climax of the story, not a dramatic scene of disaster, but the realization that the expedition had vanished so completely that history could not follow. What remained was an expanding sense of distance. A quiet admission that the event resisted explanation. By the end of the century, interest had faded into the background of other concerns. Industry widened. Cities grew. Railways stretched across territories once thought remote. The lost expedition belonged to an earlier period, when the world still had unmeasured spaces. And the North remained silent. The harbor changed. New ships arrived. Old ships were broken apart. People stopped speaking about the missing men. Time moved forward. Families kept photographs in drawers. The paper turned pale. Edges frayed. Faces remained calm. Eyes looked out. No one answered them. The offices where the expedition had been planned closed. Desks were emptied. Files were moved. Some were lost. Some were burned. Some were simply forgotten. Dust settled. The paths into the northern interior grew over. Grass covered old tracks. Trees thickened. Winters came and went. Snow erased everything again and again. Silence returned and stayed. No final journal appeared. No letter. No camp equipment. No graves. No trace of any kind. Only the knowledge that the expedition had once existed. Then it did not. Years became decades. The story faded into local rumor. Children heard parts of it. They forgot the details. Adults remembered less each year. Memory thinned. Eventually, only a line remained in official records. A date. A departure. An unresolved conclusion. Nothing more. Museums received questions. They had few answers. Exhibits did not mention the expedition. There were no artifacts to display. No objects to place behind glass. The land held its silence. Forest. Stone. Water. Wind. All unchanged. All indifferent. Footsteps once crossed it. Then footsteps stopped. There were no monuments. No plaques. No memorial services. The world did not pause. Life continued without comment. The story slipped beneath the surface of time. Not erased suddenly. Just neglected. Just quiet. Just gone. Today, the expedition belongs to the category of things not fully remembered. A subject without conclusion. A history without remains. It is a story of distance. Of maps with blank margins. Of names recorded once, then rarely spoken. And in the end, the expedition left nothing behind. No trace. No echo. Only silence. Forgotten, these stories are rarely told. Subscribe if you want to hear the next one.